All right, welcome back to the Breaking Bread Village. I am so excited for everyone that will be tuning in today, and I'm also very happy to have our panelists here today. I am going to first have them introduce themselves. So, Josh, if you'd like to go first.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh Holiday, and I'm new to the Great Lakes Beer region as of a couple of years ago, and happy to be here today.
Awesome.
I'm Steph. My pronouns are she, her. I was born and bred in the Great Lakes Bay area. I'm a transplant to the Flint area now, but this area really has a special place in my heart.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Drea Norton, and I am also from the Great Lakes Bay region, Bay City originally. Now I live in Saginaw, so happy to be here.
And I'm Kevin. I was born and raised in Saginaw, grew up in Carlton, and later in Detroit, but recently relocated back to Saginaw, so happy to be home.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again for being here. I appreciate you for taking the time to kind of connect with us today and just have this conversation. So, the title of the conversation is A Walk in My Shoes. And I picked that specifically because oftentimes people make assumptions about our different ways of life and how we walk in this life and our journey. And I don't like that. So, I try to use this platform the best that we can to just be more intentional with our information to help people understand just kind of each person's individual walk. So I want to talk just kind of, I guess I want to open up and you all kind of share, because I brought you here for a reason, right? And I want you all to just kind of share when you first really just kind of, I guess, embraced fully who you were. How did that feel? How did that feel for you personally? Because I also want to talk about how it felt for people, like how you were treated outside of that, right? But for yourself, how did it feel to really say, you know what, this is who I am, right? This is the way I'm going to walk. This is who I am. And this is what I am, period. So, Kevin, do you want to start with that?
I'll start. Sure. I'm 45 years old, so I like to believe that every day I'm learning more and more about myself and finding new ways and new opportunities to accept myself. Because I think growing up as a skinny, tall black child in the 80s, I had to try to get used to that and the name calling that is associated with that. As someone that probably knew at an early age that I was going to, well, I would say to someone who knew I was going to be gay, but actually I didn't know I was going to be gay. I actually thought I would die before then because everyone would say that, at least in Carlton and Saginaw, in our church, that, and this was the 80s, that, if you were gay, you're going to get HIV and die. And so I had already low life expectancy because I felt a black gonna die, you got HIV, you're gonna die, gay, you're gonna die. But I think eventually, through the course of my life, I've been able to, was probably when I was just in my 20s, where I just realized, like, this is who I am, people's words and those traumas I may have gathered while I was a child, and I no longer need to attach those to who I am, and made a conscious decision that, this is the walk that I'm going to walk. And part of that walk is, accepting myself, but I've always knowing that I can learn something more about myself and more about my identities, what I like, and I don't have to be apologetic about it.
Exactly. Drea?
Well, it's kind of been a really not a linear journey at all. I think for me growing up, I was very different from my sister. I was very different from a lot of kids in my school. I just kind of always felt like a little bit on the periphery, like I'm on the outside, sort of like trying to always be someone different, honestly, someone different than who I was, because I didn't feel like I fit in, and I didn't really know why. I kind of I knew I liked women as well, but I don't know that I had a label for it.
Sure.
I mean, it's kind of funny because it was my neighbor across the street that I had a a crush on, and I realized it was a crush, but it was also Dr. Beverly Crusher on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Of course it happens.
And I just realized I thought she was very, very pretty, like, but yeah, so it was like I kind of knew that I was different, but I didn't have a label for it. And then I did this short-sighted act of teenage rebellion that nobody does, and I joined the military at 18 and left a month out of high school. So it's like I knew I was different, and then I was stepping into like a packaged identity that was given to me. So like for 8.5 years, I didn't really have to do that development work. I didn't think about it. I just,
Oh, while you were in the military,
yeah,
right?
I was just told who I was. I left as Staff Sergeant Norton in the Air Force. And I was in the Air Force the whole time under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So
Right.
that also was really, in your 20s, your formative years where identity development happens. I'm in an environment where if I disclose who I am as a queer woman, I'm gonna potentially get dishonorably discharged. There was always that worry, so no room that you were in could you show up fully. You
As
always
yourself.
had to be mindful of who you were talking to, who was around, what you were saying, the normal conversations that you have on a Monday morning at work, like you have to be really careful. And, I fell in love with a woman at 19 and we never,
Yeah.
really got to, see if a relationship would have been, desired. It was just too risky. So,
Yeah.
that was really hard. And then I got out of the military and went to Michigan State. I moved from San Diego to Lansing because that's also a very normal trajectory that no one ever. In-state tuition was a huge draw. But I get to East Lansing and I'm a full-time college student and I chose a residential college at first and I'm one of 3 non-traditional students and I don't know anybody. I don't know how not to be Sergeant Norton anymore and I have no idea how to be openly queer.
Yeah.
And it was also the first time I ever really experienced discrimination. So because as a bisexual woman, and I will interchange those bisexual and queer, depending, but as a bisexual woman, I didn't know that wasn't always a desirable identity within the queer community, which that really, here I was coming, like skipping into the community. I was so happy to finally be openly free, and yet I had people tell me they didn't want to date me because of the fact that I was bisexual.
Well, and that's also a thing even within the community, and that's
Yeah,
the part that people don't want to talk about sometimes. That in any culture community, we have our little sects, right? Where it's like shouldn't do this because I've talked to people that were our older generation, and they don't accept a lot of stuff that's happening right now. Not all, of course, but there are some that I've spoken with, and I'm like, wow. So, but let's get to your story, and then we'll come back to that. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
So I came out at a very early age. I was probably like 13 or 14 when I came out to my parents, my mom. And that was in the early 2000s, late 90s. And so I come from a very accepting family. They've really embraced me and who I am through time. But I know that I am privileged in that, and I know that that was really important to my development. And I know that queer kids develop their feelings for the same sex at the same rate, same pace as straight individuals do. So I know that now, so it doesn't seem so weird to me that I came out so early. I've always kind of been a loudmouth and I don't care what a whole lot of people think. So
I don't believe that.
But yeah, and I dealt with a lot of bullying in high school.
Mhm.
That was the most challenging part, and then also having severe mental illness. I had a lot of challenges dealing with all that, and lots of things. So like the combination of all those things,
Yeah.
I didn't expect to be alive 2, didn't ever think that I could get married or have a family, and really just never planned a whole life for myself. Didn't have a lot of plans in place. So the fact that I'm here and I'm doing the work I'm doing, and I'm enjoying life, and I have a partner with kids, and it's just really been a great journey for me so far.
Awesome. Thank you. Josh?
And for me, as a 29-year-old gay man, my pronouns are he, him, his. But from a very early age, I remember that gender was almost like there was a set way that you had to live and things you did and things you had to perform as a boy. That's what boys do, right?
Right.
And was one of the hardest things growing up. That was actually addressing that and my interests and how they maybe weren't conventional things that boys typically did were things I had to address before I could even think about my sexuality. And so it really was when I was in high school, and I chose to do the arts over some sports that I had done. I played 3 sports my whole life. That was what boys did, right? Like, that's what I did. But I did theater with my friends. I had been in band, but I did theater, and it was a different way to express myself and embrace who I was. And so, you know, I'm also 29, so it was like a really interesting time when like Glee came out. So I'm really grateful that although I went through my own personal journey of coming out before the legalization of gay marriage, but at the same time, I was there when Glee happened. And I know that for so many people, that wasn't a thing, right? Like other people have like, you know, you have Will and Grace, or you have whatever during your era. But for me, Glee was this way that kind of brought together this normalization of who I was personally. I wasn't able to embrace that within like my high school experience, but being able to see those characters represented on the screen that did things that like were not traditional for boys and what boys did. And so that helped me. And then I went to college, and that's when I really came out. And I came out to my high school friends, and I came out to my college friends, and I came out to my family, and honestly to a wide variety of reactions from many different people in different sectors, particularly because I grew up in a rural community south of Lansing. And so I know we'll probably talk about that some more, but really for me, I think that the arts were so critical in my ability to embrace who I was, which is why I'm so glad that I work full-time in the arts now. So it's why I'm such a strong advocate for what the arts can do and the power of that in representation and storytelling in front of young people. But for me to embrace myself, I really had to go through that and challenge gender norms, and gender as a social construct is like the thing that I yell out about all the time.
Right.
Like, you know, when there's long lines in the bathroom, like, use whichever one you want it. It's like
I
this
do.
is so stupid.
I do.
Oh, Aaron does it?
Oh my goodness, yes. I tell my husband, I said, watch out the outside the door because I'm using this one if I have to go, because the women's line is always so long.
Yeah.
They both are toilets and they both flush. So
You're right.
The bathroom is gender neutral at home.
Right.
yeah, exactly. So thank you. So I do want to talk a
Can
little.
I piggyback off of what he said?
Sure,
About,
yeah.
like the media representation. Like I was turning a teenager when Ellen came out. So yeah, that media representation was really important. Between her and Rosie O'Donnell, man, I had it.
yes. No, representation is important. And, you know, I do talk all the time about representation and across the spectrum. And people don't understand, especially when they're always represented, they don't understand why it's so important to see something out there that represents you in your walk.
Well, I think that's why, like, the work I do, like, why I try to be more visible and unapologetic about who I am, because the 2 most salient identities that I have is a veteran, as a veteran and as a queer woman. And in veteran spaces, you don't really see a whole lot of queer representation.
Well, I wanted to have that talk. I've reached out because I want to have that talk. And for people who are not in it anymore, I know that if you're still in it, that comes with its own stuff, right? But people that it's not supposed to, but I mean, the same way when I want to talk to it, but when I want to talk to teachers, right? People that work and they don't have union representation, they're afraid to talk about what's going on. So it's just when you're still in it, sometimes you're afraid to really voice what you have to say about.
But see anybody that had my experience either, or it wasn't really talked about, that there are veterans in your community
Right.
and whatnot. And so I think that's because I am at that intersection of both of those identities and me being more vocal and unapologetic about who I am. That's why I do it, because I don't see anybody like me.
Yeah, yeah. I know you all talked about, several of you talked about knowing at a young age, and coming out at a young age. Did anybody not have that experience where they came out at a young age and, like really let the world know, like, this is who I am?
I didn't let the world know until I was like in my 20s, though I had sexual experiences in my teens with males, you know, right on the report. You know what I'm saying? But I think, I do wonder what it would have meant to have a different type of media representation or a different type of acceptance, because, I think for me as a Black teen and a Black kid growing up, often what we had were the stereotypical images. So it was, and these are my favorite, Blaine and Antoine, and Men in Black and Men on Film and Men of Color. And so, but I was always told I was supposed to not like them, and I was like, but I like them. And when my mom and them talked about the hairdresser and they talked about it was funny, I wanted to know more about this funny man. So I always raised their hand and said,
Right, right.
Like I was always attracted to those types of people because they had such great personalities. They seemed like that's seemed like the people I need to be around.
Yeah.
And so I am excited now when I see, people really being able to express it at a younger age and seeing families and communities that are supportive. I was a camp counselor outside Philadelphia at a camp called Rainbow Mountain. It's a camp for children of queer parents. And just to be in that type of environment, this was 20 years ago, and just say, I'm taking that as a positive sign. It's a nice little being.
Yeah, he keeps coming back. He was here earlier.
But, just to see what that's like, to see families and like 20 years ago, I could have never imagined such a thing would have even, at that point, I guess 30 years ago, never could have existed.
Well, then I see kids where it's just a non-issue. It's not even really. It's as part of you as like being left-handed almost to just see.
You're speaking about like children, yeah.
Like it's so normalized.
They're not really coming out anymore. They're really just able to be who they are and embrace it, and it's a beautiful thing.
It's like inviting in instead of coming out.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
they're so well educated. Like, my partner's kid, she's 13 and she's teaching me new stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
She really has opened my eyes to that age group and the differences that they are making, and that they don't even realize it by not having to come out. Like, we have fought a really long battle. And for them to be able to be to a point where they feel comfortable just being themselves, that is totally worth it to me. It's definitely worth it. And just, I know Jerry and I both, like, we work in a way that supports the queer community a lot. And so it's nice to see that the work we're doing and anybody who's involved with like the movement, it's just nice to see that we're benefiting from it as a society for the most part.
And I would add that I love to see that kids these days are able to embrace it and just like it's more normalized, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think to myself often about when we talk about like the influence of people talking around you or the media and whatnot, I think about the remarks, just like one remark from somebody that maybe a kid knows that's a leader in their church, a leader in their community, a leader in their neighborhood. One of those comments that is against somebody in the LGBTQ community is one step back for that individual. And that's still a thing that exists today. Like the Don't Say Gay bill is one step back when kids are sitting at home and they see that on the news with their parents. They're like, oh, I don't think I can come out because this is a thing.
Can you explain that a little bit more, the Don't Say Gay bill? Because I don't think that people really understand what that means.
Yeah.
And what people are living with when you have to live around people that say that.
Yeah, so I will say I'm not an expert on the Don't Say Gay bill,
No.
but I will say it's obviously a bill that was passed in Florida through
Obviously.
exactly. It was passed in Florida, and it really is to hinder the use of it really just it makes for a toxic environment and also not a safe environment for the kids. It doesn't keep the kids in mind with the bill. So from my perspective, when kids see that, it's just like, if they can do this, what is going to be next?
Well, I
How
mean,
am
that's
not
Roe v.
protected?
Wade, right?
Right.
Roe v. Wade, and I don't think people, thank you for that, because I don't think people understand what all that entails. You know, Roe v. Wade, people just think it's about abortion, and it's bigger than
More
that.
than that, it's
Yeah.
about our rights as human beings. And,
Yeah.
you know, if they can repeal Roe versus Wade, like, what's gonna stop them from repealing, like, same-sex marriage? Or the access to Plan B, or access to birth control, like, there's.
Interracial marriage.
Yeah.
Interracial marriage or some of the side
Yes,
applications
exactly.
and a lot of those were groundbreaking for, you know, the queer community and you know, because they provide just rights of privacy and rights to just the rights that we deserve. And so
Just to live your life.
And the
Just to
right
live.
to be gay in the military, like, well, when you mentioned it, like, the fact that, like, it's so low key, the first advocates in, for gay rights were military vets.
That's
Who had came back from World War I and World War II, like, that's.
Oh,
how
I didn't know
long-
that.
Yes, yeah.
Did you know that it was a veteran who designed both the gay pride and the trans flag?
No, I did not know that.
Who
No, I didn't know.
designed them.
And I think for me, this is like one of those reasons why I think it's so important for us all to continue to remain vocal and advocates, because although the times are easier than what maybe any of the four of us remember growing up, but I remember when somebody made a weird comment or shared a weird article or a discriminatory article on Facebook as a kid. And so sometimes I'll comment on something to somebody I see in my hometown or another community, and people are like, oh, don't comment, you're not going to win with that person. And I always say, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this because I hope the little me that sees somebody share this knows that not everybody that is associated with that person that they may know believes the same things they do. And that I'm not trying to ever engage in an argument, but rather say, this is not the only perspective that exists in the world. Because there were people that I grew up in my hometown, many of them are very supportive. But there are a few that are vocal people that are very involved in the community. And you're like, oh, that person's really involved. They're a good person.
I know, and then they shock
neighborhood
you.
development.
Yes.
And then they share something like that because of their own personal beliefs. And it's hindering. You're like, oh my gosh, okay, maybe I'm not gay. Because nobody else stood up and said, no, Pat, that's not right. And no, that isn't the only opinion that exists in the world.
Yeah.
And that, for me, when I went to college, it was seeing that college is like bringing a worldly perspective to kids. For me, that was what it was for me. It was seeing that the world was bigger than the world that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And that there was diversity in all its forms and the people I was able to connect with. And that's what I love most about Michigan State. So I'm sorry that you didn't have as good of an experience with that when you started back.
It was a lot of growth. Though.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a lot of growth,
But that lived experience of being bisexual is a real thing, and it's obviously not just related to college. It really is something that's still a problem in the gay community. Like my best friend's bi, and when we go to like an event and it's all gay men, they're like, why is she here? Like as if like she is ruining their experience because they only want gay men there. They don't want like women there at all.
Right.
And it's like horrific. And so then you have to handle that too, but it's a real thing that exists in the LGBTQ community.
Absolutely, there is such discrimination against bisexuals, and it's unfortunate.
well, it's just like with any larger community. It is diverse in and of itself, so you have all different kinds of people that make it up. And exactly, like there is still a problem with racism. There's still a problem with biphobia. There's still, I mean, there's aspects of every community.
Yes. So tell me no, you're okay. So what is the problem? What do people say? Because I've never heard, I mean, I know that there is discrimination, but what is the reason? Why do people?
Do you want to take this one, or do you want me to do it while you chill out a little bit about it? I identify as a lesbian, but I go by queer. As a lesbian who has mostly dated bisexuals, I know that there is a lot of discrimination from the lesbian community that is biphobic. And I want to apologize on behalf of the whole community.
Thank you so much.
But a lot of it is that, like, you're not seen as valid because if you're in a relationship with a man, you're a non-practicing bisexual.
You're just invisible, is
Yes,
what it is.
Really?
absolutely.
Well, yeah, because, and this is probably what I try to
Be
clear it
so-
up a little,
Be
but,
so visible.
a little bit. Because if I'm walking down the street with a male partner, it's a straight couple, my identity gets completely erased. If I'm in a relationship with a female partner, same thing. My identity is erased. I'm assumed to be a lesbian. It's a whole other side of me that's just not there. So, and then I think there's a lot of insecurity that I've seen in the lesbian community, at least in my experience with the people who have discriminated against me or have told me that they wouldn't date me. I've had someone just respond with "ew."
Oh,
Yeah,
That's
like
terrible.
you're tainted if you're somehow, like, because you've been with a man.
Listen, dating bisexuals, it's a little bit easier because, let's get real, cis straight men. It's easy to impress.
But it's just, I mean, I like kind, intelligent people that want to, that are on a path of self-improvement. I mean, that it's important to do good in the world. I mean, there's traits that I look for in a human.
a person,
a
yeah.
person. And so it's disappointing when you're not even given a chance because of some preconceived notion. There's a lot of myth, that you're gonna leave a woman for a man because that you're
Really?
sexualized all the
Really?
time.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that.
Or
Yeah.
that you're gonna steal someone's man away if you're, talking to them. Like, there's just always
Really?
so many
Wow.
misconceptions and assumptions about who you are.
And that's with society as a
Yes.
whole, I think, because it's across the board. All of societal expectations come from some type of monogamous culture, but also like just that baseline of what is seen as normal.
And kind of what you were talking about.
Well, I was just
Yeah.
gonna add that that's all very real. There's also this realistic experience of discrimination for race, and you could probably talk about this much more, but particularly like the use of, oh, it's just my preference, and which is horrific. Preference means discrimination, is what that means, and it's so often used in the gay community. And actually, was just in New York and saw A Strange Loop, which is about to win all the Tonys. But it's a play actually written by a Detroit native that is all about Black, queer, and for him, the fat phobia that exists in the gay community as well. But there's a lot of discrimination within, and you see this so much where people are trying to advocate against that, right? So like we're trying to be activists in our own way, even in our own communities, but we still have work to do. And I'm hopeful that we'll see that change also for bisexual people and really the whole alphabet of LGBTQIA+, because there's a lot more understanding that I think people are having. Like I see it so often with like people that I grew up with that are now like, oh, I am asexual, I'm demisexual, I'm pansexual, I'm bisexual, and it's just, I always joke, I'm like, well, I was gay before it was cool, but it's amazing that it seems like now, now it's like everyone I grew up with is on the spectrum now, and I'm like, cool, well, thank you, we all thought this, and we've been saying this since we came out when we were 18, but it is interesting, and I'm hopeful that as we continue to have these conversations that we can debunk this, but.
I heard what everything that's been said. Well, one thing I've been thinking about, as we have these things converge, and so, both this openness where we have more people, accepting, even accepting, willing to explore their own sexual identities, but also with that other force of the discrimination within the community, what that will do. Like, will we have this holistic community? When I was trying to come out in the 80s, there was this place called San Francisco, this magical place where the boys roam free. It was that kind of, but even in Philadelphia and what we call the neighborhood of Philly, we now, it's beautiful, we love it. But now that sometimes we go, it's like, are there any gay people here? Are there any queer people here? Because, and some of it is, yes, they are. Well, you see a room with baby carriages, and now we have families, and not now because we've always had families.
But I know what you mean. Yeah.
So it's I'm trying to think about the identities and how certain places even held those identities. And as a Black person, even here in Saginaw, sometimes the question is like, where do we hang out? Where can we go? To find other. Black and brown,
For anyone listening, can somebody please open up a queer bar in the Great Lakes Bay region? I would just like to
Maybe a
put that
bookshop.
out there.
Or
a bookshop, or a coffee shop,
We did it.
or something.
We should talk about that. That sounds fun.
No, I
Yeah,
think
like,
that's,
absolutely, like,
no, I think it's a good idea.
Honestly, like when I got out of the military and moved to Lansing, that
Yeah.
has a very visible queer community and
Yeah.
a long-standing one. And I learned, and because of that, there were queer elders there.
Yes.
You learned your queer history. You learned.
we are now queer elders.
I know, I'm gonna be 42 next month.
Oh, goodness.
But still, I
Crack
think
me up.
that visibility is so necessary. And when there aren't visible spaces, how do younger people interact in a multi-generational way? You don't get to hear those stories. You don't get to hear the struggle. You just get to reap the benefits, which is exactly why it's done. So generations below you can have a better life. At least that's what I think we should be doing. If there's no opportunity and no space for those conversations to happen, then it's taken for granted the struggle that it took.
Yeah.
One of the things that I try to, I'm committed to, no matter when I do displays of and exhibits of historical items, particularly Black historical items. And so
Beautiful displays.
Just wrapped up a show at the Saginaw Art Museum, and one of the things that I did, and some people who know me, they knew exactly what I was doing, but a lot of people in Saginaw probably didn't realize how queer of a show that was.
Well, surprised, not it for it.
So, and some of it, I can't say that I it was just me, one person, a straight artist, straight Black man, wanted to do a large image that we centered in the exhibit of James Baldwin. The books that were there were by either queer or feminist Black authors in terms of the books that were displayed. On the photo wall, the portrait wall, I brought in a number of photos that I've collected. In Philadelphia, I started the Black LGBT Archivist Society to collect and preserve Philadelphia's Black LGBT history. And so I was able to put those pieces in there. And even like with the more touching of Philadelphia's first HIV/AIDS rally in '84, in a picture that was featured in the Philadelphia Inquirer. But just to try to make sure we incorporate those pieces, because for some young people, I am the oldest gay person they know.
That they think that they know.
That they
know
of.
Yes,
That they know of, right.
Yes,
And
yes,
that's want to talk about it, and that they can come and ask questions.
yes.
I'm visible and I'm accessible, and at least I try to be accessible. And I think that's important for all of us, and it sounds like that's what we're all trying to do. But I think there's so much more we can do in Great Lakes Bay region and I think a coffee shop would be excellent. I just think it's, when people come into the Great Lakes Bay region, we look, I know when I came back, I was like, okay, so, where am I going Friday nights? Where are the gay places? I'm not going back every weekend to Detroit. Like, how can I stay home and create that feel?
I do know that, I think one of the reasons that there is no gay, specifically gay exclusive places is that we're welcomed other places now, and people are so fluid. And the youth in the younger population is more fluid, that we can integrate into those places and we can claim those as safe spaces. I know everyone knows the Red Eye, dear Lord, are we waiting for them to open back up? But what is that? A new dawn?
Dawn of a New Day.
Yeah.
Jim Washington.
Yep, Dawn of a New Day, great place. We now have Creation Coffee and Live Oak. So there are some spaces that I know for sure are safe spaces, but it is a thing that would be great if we had those places that bigger cities do. But I know here you have to look for events. We have drag brunches, we have drag shows, we have those other events like the historic Masonic Temple just put on a drag show in Bay City, and it was fantastic. It's the gayest thing to hit the Great Lakes Bay Area, I think.
Well, and then the fact that there even is a Pride Festival, like I never thought I would see that in my hometown, truly. Like, and I never thought that, you know, I would be representing veterans at that space, you know, like, so that was an interesting thing, and then it was really kind of the first time that I was there. The person who started the first Gay Straight Alliance at Western at my old high school came up to me because their mom like reached out to me wanting to help have some support because she didn't know where to go when her kid came out as trans. So it was such a full circle moment.
Yeah.
To like be there and like there's a GSA at Western. Like,
Right.
What?
Right.
Yes. I wanna circle back to something that you brought up, Kevin. And I really appreciate you all sharing your stories because I think this is important for us to share because yes, things have become a little bit more accepting, but we do understand, like you talked about, Josh, how it only takes one thing to take us back as we are literally watching right now.
They got complacent.
Yes.
Like I think now is when things need to be loud.
Yes,
and
and
unapologetic.
yes.
Vocal because
There's lots of protests going on tomorrow in different counties and different cities for the overturn of Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, I know it's one today.
There was that one, I won't say we decided on the 10, but there was one decided it started at 11.
Yeah, someone let me know that there was one going on. I want to circle back though, because I know you mentioned, you know, living with HIV/AIDS. There's so much myth around that, and I really want to talk about that because growing up in a Black Southern Baptist environment, we weren't allowed to even talk about this. Like, I mean, we just didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about people, even though we knew some of them directors, some of those choir directors were gay. We weren't allowed to talk about it. We really weren't. I mean, nobody ever mentioned it, right? And then there were people who passed away. And now, in retrospect, I know it was probably from HIV/AIDS, right? And I know that now because we know what things look like and but then we weren't allowed to talk about it. So I don't know about, you know, different communities, but I know in mine growing up, we just could not, it just wasn't a thing. You just didn't talk about it and you were damned to hell. That was the end of it. You were going to burn forever in a lake of fire. So nobody was able to talk about it, even if they did walk that walk, right? So tell me a little bit about living with that type of stigma attached to it and those myths that aren't true.
You know, I like to tell people, so I've been following HIV since the 80s. I got to just my earliest memories, and especially as I was starting to develop even just a mind around politics, was Ronald Reagan didn't do this, and that was, you know, or watch television and hearing different things, different stories. And I'm gonna get to the point after your question, but you know, in college, you know, in '95, that's when we first got our first, you know, real HIV test. Like you could actually go in, you know, and get like a test for like 2 weeks. You can go and get a test, and we're, you know, in the mid '90s, we were starting to get better medication. So people were, you know, getting off of the toxic medicine that was eventually going to kill them to medicine now that are more sustaining of life. And even most of my work professionally was around recruiting individuals for biomedical HIV trials, or just I come from a research background, and so I've been someone that's been I like to say been an advocate for HIV, not necessarily for gay people with HIV, because HIV is not a gay disease,
Thank you for saying that.
And so a lot of people that I interacted with, particularly Black individuals throughout Philadelphia and Washington D.C., finding ways of looking at and examining humanity, and I think all those things were great. It was 10 years into doing the work that I had tested positive for HIV. And in fact, it was one of those situations of, this issue where people don't want to talk about it. So I was at a hospital, and because I'm a researcher, I know the symptoms, I know the signs. I go to the hospital because I'm like, this ain't right. I know my body. And that was something that I had to get to a place of learning how to know my body, of being comfortable. And the nurses not wanting to give me an HIV test. They knew me from my work. And so I didn't pick the type. I wasn't a drug addict. I didn't appear multiple times with chlamydia or gonorrhea or syphilis. So they're like, no, it's probably just a stomach bug or flu.
These are the nurses?
At the hospital.
Wow.
At the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, where I was at the time also pursuing my second master's degree in public health. And so it was just like, I know this is like a public health response. So
Right.
this is inappropriate. And so, I got up from the hospital bed, went to my office, knew we had HIV test, did the HIV test there, found out HIV positive.
You had to test yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I've always been the kind of person that's classic me, because I'm a twin as well. So I'm an independent person. So I can do this shit myself. I can do it myself. I don't need you. But I think, what I realized, I was happy that I tested positive when I did and had built up for myself a community of support. I was able to dispel myths about what this might mean. The knowledge. Still scary as fuck. Still, you hear people say, well, it's no longer a death sentence. Like, you're right, it's no longer a death sentence, but I'm waking up in the morning.
Well, if you're adherent to your medication
But even
every single day.
But even the medicines are toxic. And we know that, it's high toxicity for your kidneys, so those things, are things that I live with, it comes to play, thinking about relationships, thinking about sex. Fortunately, what I'm happy about now, and so I tested positive in 2011, 2012, we, in the research community, discovered that you can give a person a pill every day, or a pill, and at this time it was every day, and we have better research now, but you can get a pill and take it periodically, and it will prevent HIV.
Is that the PrEP?
That's PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis. And so we have many different pre-exposure prophylaxis, or a pill you can take, before you encounter disease that will fight that disease off. And so we are fortunate enough now that we have these innovations. I think the stigma, however, still has so many people unaware of the innovations or scared to take them.
Oh, wow, okay.
So the other thing is, like, if you're in a highly stigmatized community and you have a bottle of HIV drugs on your counter and you try to tell someone, I don't have HIV, I'm taking this to prevent HIV. And you're like, okay. So I think I think what we need more of is the education. We need more of the awareness.
Yes.
We also need more of the visibility. And I think that's, I'm in a different place in my life than a lot of people. Even just, I don't have to worry about my job firing me because of my HIV status. I don't have to worry about losing my housing because of HIV status. I don't have to worry about losing benefits or different things because of HIV status. And so that's not the walk of everyone.
Right.
To be vocal. So I don't want to encourage everyone to, don't tell me, and I'm not rolling out my whole medical chart for everybody. I think I'm not doing that either. But for this particular issue that I have been so familiar with since the 1980s at Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church on Grant Street in Carlton.
Everybody have a Shiloh missionary.
And hear our loving pastor say those things, even my loving family members. I feel like I have for the little child in me. Like I'm not to be selfish for all the other little children. Most times I'm doing it to encourage the little child in me that had to sit through those sermons, that had to sit and hear people say daring things about people. All the things I absorbed. I'm now fighting every day for that little Kevin Travell Jones that was trying to build himself up.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that and whatever I say can inspire folks, but I tell most people, like, I'm talking to myself, and every day is still a struggle, you know, so not a struggle, but not every day is a struggle. Often it's a struggle to still feel whole and accepted, because, you know, there's still a rejection, you know, so that's
And you parent that little kid.
Well, it's super important to talk about because there is a lot of stigma and there's a lot of people who are uneducated on it, truthfully. And I can say, even for myself, growing up, I was uneducated on it entirely. In my community, we weren't talking about HIV/AIDS when I was growing up, and totally didn't understand. And then there is a fear around talking about it, because when you know about something, then what does knowing something mean? Like, it's just like why people don't want to go to the doctor, because if I know, then it is real. But if I just don't know, it doesn't exist.
Right.
But I do want to touch on one thing that you talked about, in that being the healthcare treatment that you've gotten. And I think that it's very common, particularly in communities, unfortunately like ours, because I've seen this myself personally, where there are healthcare professionals or doctors, sadly, that are not trained to work with LGBTQ community members. And so I actually had this experience in 2020 and 2019 with a doctor here, where I was tokenized for being gay. He's like, oh, you're my only gay patient that I have. And also not important to be able to provide healthcare to me, but also was completely unaware of what PrEP was. And also, which is quite baffling, because if you watch TV, there's PrEP commercials almost every hour on most TV stations. But was totally unaware of PrEP, and then which took me the courage to even have that conversation. It took years to have that conversation. But then
You're talking about with your doctor?
with the doctor.
Oh, God.
And then when we started to have that conversation, the doctor started to give moral beliefs about life choices
The doctor
versus giving medical advice.
Okay.
And those are things that exist in our community. So it's not just so that the LGBTQ plus community is more familiar with the preventative measures of HIV and AIDS, also that undetectable means untransmissible, that we are aware of that, because these are things that are also going to be discriminatory from, like, parents of queer kids, or aunts and uncles, or people in the community, and their stigmas and judgments if we're all uninformed of how this works. But it still exists in the gay community, where people, if you are positive undetectable, that they will not talk to you. Like, as if you are like an alien, which is horrific and discriminatory, and it exists and it's real. And so I'm always wanting to make sure, because I can also know for myself, I've grown up a lot since when I was a kid, and I was totally uninformed of anything. And if you're informed, how can we share that knowledge with other people? Because it is a real thing. And on the discrimination in our community, this is actually probably one of the biggest things that actually exists in our community, particularly gay men.
Yeah.
You know, I was across the street at St. Mary's, and I'm saying the name of the hospital, because I tend to go there with my dad. I had a stroke 2 years ago, and I'm his guardian. And so I can go to all of his appointments, or when I need to meet in the emergency room. And so I'm just waiting for the EMS to bring him from the nursing facility. So I was sitting there, and I was listening to this conversation between the receptionist and the person that was doing the COVID testing, because it was kind of slow, fortunately, at the ER. So they were able to have a little banter. You know, and she was talking about, they were talking about this guy, and they kept saying, well, we can't figure him out. And then she's like, well, you know, he doesn't talk like the gays, and he doesn't move like the gays. And so, you know, I'm sitting there just thinking about this concept, okay, so what am I gonna do? How am I gonna interact in this? Because I believe I have to say something about it. Like, I don't know how to keep my mouth closed. That's one of my, yeah. So I was like, I have to say something. So I saw my dad coming in, and so they called me up. And so I got checked in. And so I looked at her and I was like, you know, I'm gonna use my gay voice on Sundays.
It's your day of rest.
And she was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, you know, any other time I would let this pass.
Yeah.
I was like, but one, I'm probably not in a good space. I'm here to take care of my dad, and I think this is bullshit when I should just be able to come here and get the same type of medical treatment as everyone else.
Yes.
And what you did was you just assumed that maybe based on my appearance, I try to gay it up. Like I do. I do. Like,
The older generation, we have to flag.
So, I don't know what I had on or what I was carrying myself, but you know, but I told her, I was like, I have to report this. Like, I have to report it by your name. And it was not to like harm this person or anything like that, but I cannot risk anybody going to a place where we should be able to get medical treatment.
Right.
And have people treat them in a particular way that will cause them to walk out and not get an HIV test or not stay for the COVID treatment or whatever it is that they might need in that space. That we should not have to go into our public spaces or our hospitals or anywhere and be discriminated against. Because,
Right.
and all because somebody wants to have a conversation. I think it's fine to have a conversation, but
my goodness.
But if you have one negative healthcare experience, you're not going back. That's the problem.
Yeah.
One, I think for me, and my experience was, it was like, well, I'm glad I'm your first gay patient ever, so that way nobody else has to. I was like, I'm a confident, strong individual that can handle this, and I'm going to teach you. So let's sit down. And I actually did have a teaching moment with the doctor, which I was like, this is really sad because I don't have a doctor. But I said, you know, I'm glad that we're having this conversation. So that way you know to never say these things to somebody again. Because then he, in that instance, you know, PrEP was used as a comparison to like supplying clean needles to
Harm
patients
reduction.
or for like a heroin.
Yes, right.
And in rather than looking at PrEP as like a preventative healthcare measure like birth control.
Right.
And so it's interesting. I think I just will say this, so if anybody's watching, that PrEP is available in many forms. If you look online, it looks very expensive. Don't worry, there's ways to get it for free. If you have healthcare, your insurance company will cover it. But those are things that a doctor wouldn't even be able to tell you if they've never prescribed it. They don't know anything about it. And in this, from some people in the healthcare field that I've talked to, is very prevalent in many and most practices where there are doctors that ads. And so, but I still have friends that are scared to take it because they're not, you know, what does that mean? Or, you know, I don't know how to get it, or I'm afraid to talk to my doctor about it, I'm afraid to apply online. And we just have to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Well, and sexual health is a part of everybody's whole total health care. So you should be having conversations with every patient about their sexual practices and behaviors and orientation and gender identity. You should be having those conversations, no, not just to who you know patients for the lack of cultural competence and cultural humility with anybody in the healthcare field, mental health included. It's, you need to understand how everybody's life, like the things that impact their life, who they are impacts their life. Like, so you learn about racial differences in healthcare and different cultural things that affect healthcare and how, like, it's up to the provider to remain educated, to provide the best quality care to their patients, period.
Yeah.
This is a part of that.
Yeah.
I think we're fortunate.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think one thing we're fortunate about in the state of Michigan is that all medical residents have to go through and have to be offered and go through the implicit bias training. And I know CMU last year did. I participated in one of their trainings, and so they had someone focused on race, which was me and Black teaching, someone focused on gender, someone focused on sexuality, sexual orientation. And folks have to come in, at least sit and be a part of those conversations.
Part of the licensure for social work now.
Yeah.
It just got added
Oh,
So I
good.
think,
as a requirement for continuing education.
So one of the things I was gonna mention is, I'm a contractor with Apricots, out of Freeland, which is Applied Research Consultants. And Heidi Whale Miyazaki is the, CEO there, and she and the team at Apricots does a whole lot to, try and educate the community. There's been contracts with Saginaw County Mental Health, and we spread information in the schools. There is this group called SOGIAC here in the Saginaw Bay area, and they bring SOGIAC brings together a lot of individuals from different backgrounds, different organizations like the juvenile justice system and churches and schools, and there are members from those places that come together and they try and figure out a way to better serve the community, because the queer community here, there's not a lot of open individuals that they can go to and feel safe with. And so we're doing our best with Apricots to try and train those professionals on the history and expectations of our community, and different things like that. So, you know, the work is being done, it's just incremental, and that's with any change at any system level. So, there is effort being made, it's not as open as it is like in areas like Detroit. There is attempts being made, and we now have local information. If you go to the Apricots website, there is different surveys that have been done, youth LGBTQ surveys, that show the evidence to back up the research that we're doing.
Sure.
website?
Apricots, APPRECOTS, and I'm not exactly sure.
Well,
what
we
the
can
website
get
is.
it and then we'll put it on with this so
Yes.
people can have it.
I do know the SOGIAC website is SOGIYAC.org. So you can pull that up, there's plenty of resources there. Thank you for asking, because
Yeah.
Orientation, gender identity.
Youth Advocacy Council, yeah,
And someone just commented and said that Flint is fortunate to have the Sunshine Family Care Clinic.
yes.
They provide primary medical care and HIV specialty care through education, prevention, treatment.
And
Yeah.
I know Great Lakes Bay Health Centers has a LGBTQ task force now, or a work group now to really take a look at some of these issues to try to make these improvements, and they have some really good people on that group that, I mean, because
Really.
there is a lot of work that still needs to be done, just
Yeah,
as
and-
far as
I'm
things
sorry.
go.
You know, having left, you know, this area for more than 20 years and then returning, I mean, I've come back, you know, for visits and things like that, but part of the reason why I wanted to come back, because I felt like so much has happened from when I was a kid trying to navigate through these issues to now. And I feel like now this is the Saginaw that I feel comfortable living in. You know, I may not have all the resources and all the bells and whistles in some of the places where I live.
Still saying awesome.
It is. And, you know, and to know that, one thing I know about us in the Midwest, and especially in Saginaw and in the Great Lakes Bay region, we work hard.
Yeah,
Like,
we hustle.
we hustle. Like the fact that we get up when it's snowing and go to work, like
Yes.
other cities that shut the city down, it's like, this is 3 inches of snow. Like we
Real
know.
talk, in Virginia where I was stationed, 3 inches was when the whole base was shut down, because they don't have any means to remove it.
Exactly. They don't have the
It's
equipment and
salt
stuff.
trucks in the whole like region, and so yeah.
But I feel like we have the tools, we know how to make these things happen. I think people are doing it, and like I'm so excited and impressed by all of you, and to be in fellowship and community with you all around these issues. So.
Well, thank you for your seniority here.
Yeah, the elder.
I think we're ready to
You are. That's hilarious. You know, I want to ask you guys something you know, this, because I love this. I love this conversation. I love the transparency and, you know, just sharing this space because it's important and we need to do it. And want to ask you all in regards to from a parental perspective, right? So when we have parents that, you know, may, and I hate feel this feeling that their child may be, you know, wanting to come out or share this other part of them, right? That they have not been able to share. What type of advice would you give to parents, right? Because you guys are, you know, have been speaking about, and I'm sorry saying guys, I've been trying to change that. It's a Midwestern thing saying guys, so I'm just saying you all. Yes, yes. So I apologize. I've been trying to correct myself with that. But what would you all say to parents, you know, and just community people who want to work with children or work with children? Because sometimes you don't know how to approach, right? You don't want to say the wrong thing. I think people always say, we don't want to say the wrong thing. And it's like, but say something. You got to say something. So how would you all kind of,
Yeah, so through Africats again, I spoke at Heritage High School to their GSA. And
GSA?
Yeah, their Gay Straight Alliance.
Thank you.
And there was one student who spoke up and said that, you know, they are queer and their parents don't know, but their mother is like really pushy about it. So you can be too accepting or open.
When you say pushy, what do you mean? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So like really like, you know, she suspects this child as being queer and also is very open to the point that it's making the kid uncomfortable to come out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so even though that support is there, that openness is there, pushing too hard before someone's ready can definitely offer detrimental results. And again, that SOGIAC website, SOGIYAC.org. They do have resources for parents on what to do when your child comes out or what to expect. So there are resources on that website for parents.
Well, I guess for me, even more so before they come out, right?
Right.
Well, I would say,
But thank you for that stuff.
Yeah.
PFLAG is also a really good resource, and they have, I mean, it's been around since the 70s.
PFLAG?
PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, I think is what it
Okay.
stood for, but it's specifically to friend community, but there's also resources, and I think educating yourself, just read, meet other parents that, you know, and find community, but I really just love your kid.
Yeah.
Be a safe space so that and really just love your kid.
Yeah.
And in the age of social media, you know, there's always the chance that you can find those support groups online. There are community resources in the area that offer support to parents. But yeah, what adding on to what Drea said is like the best thing you can do is love your kid as they are, as they present themselves to you, and just be accepting, be open.
So let me just, and I know you guys want to say something, so I'm gonna let you all say that real quick, and then I want to piggyback on what you all said.
I would say that
Thank you,
in
Julie.
any situation, you should never try to push somebody out or try
Right.
It's not linear. Like there's nothing linear about it. And when you grow up, we unfortunately still live in a society where you grow up and you are taught that if I'm a boy, I like girls. And you still hear that when kids are too, like, oh, he's gonna be a
Lady
ladies
killer.
killer, you know, or
Yeah.
she's gonna be a ladies man, you know, that still exists. And we do have to tell people, which I do all the time. Or you could just not say that and sexualize your child. But but it is important that that you realize that is still reality. And so for kids, I certainly know this for myself, you have to figure out, like I went through, it was like, I'm bisexual because I'm like physically attracted to men, but I'm emotionally attracted to women, which actually just meant like I prefer to hang out with women as my best. It's confusing at that age, and it's not necessarily understandable. And so a kid has to go through that because you also know, like when a kid comes out, they're not gonna be like, I'm confused, like, maybe they would, this would be wonderful, you could just say, I don't really know if I like, you know, for me, because I don't know if I like women. You know, maybe that's just what coming out is, but it probably feels more formalized, like, are you bisexual, are you gay, are you pansexual, like, I don't think kids are thinking about, maybe they are, pansexual, demisexual, you know, I don't know, maybe they are, but it feels like you kind of have to have a better understanding, a confidence in yourself when you tell a parent. So, like, it's good to hear that story because a kid doesn't want to be pushed out. They want to do it on their own terms.
Right.
And I think that goes for anybody you see around you. And would just be kind of my note. My other little thing is that for parents, if you are just discovering this, don't just Google, like, my kid came out, what do I do? Unfortunately, my parents did, and my parents are so wonderful and not taking into account my personal situation, where my best
Right.
friends around me were super supportive. And so then they were, okay, we're just gonna put a bubble around you to protect you. And I don't need protection, I just need loving. And so, and then also maybe like some of the books that it would tell you to read, like Religion and the Homosexual, was not maybe the best book to read to, those are real life things. And so, just taking the time to look resources to help.
Real quick, and Evan, I want you guys, I just want to say this real quick, just so I don't forget this thought. As a parent of a child who is gay, I was probably very protective of him. And it was just a natural instinct because I knew the world, right? And then two, you have to understand with in a personal thing, have 4 boys, well, they're men now, who the 3 older ones all played sports. They were like typical, stereotypical alpha males, right? Whatever that, we know what that looks, what people say that looks like, right? And they played the sports, they were the jocks, they were these, and then
so attractive to say also.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And people liked, and then my youngest son, I was very protective of him, like he does not want to do that. He's not there. So for me, in trying to protect him, I would hope that I was not doing like a counterproductive thing, but I don't like when people put people in boxes and then, your children don't always tell you everything that they're going through internally, right? So
I
yeah.
should clarify a little bit. When I say protective, in that just because when somebody comes out as gay does not mean that who they are and their identity is going to change.
Right.
Because thought that I was gonna which, hey, if I want to do this, like I'm gonna do this. But they thought like overnight I was going to paint my nails, dye my hair, and that maybe, the reality for so many kids is that they don't have a support system, and so they might want to harm themselves. So the concern was that, is this something that he's going to instantly do? We're going to smother you and you're going to be home and we're going to talk about and I think that's what is important for a kid.
So it sounds like just saying chill out.
There's also a lot of compassion sometimes for parents in the sense that for the person coming out, they've had a whole lot of time to get to that point, to work through this process. So they've had all this time, and at this moment, they're telling their parents who have not had all that time. And sometimes they might be blindsided by it because maybe they just didn't.
I wasn't.
And
He's probably watching now.
Well, and that sometimes it confirms a lot of what you thought.
I was like, boy, we already knew that, but go ahead.
But there's still a lot of times a grief process because you're grieving the plans you have.
Right, and you are taught that this is, your boy is supposed to grow up and get a wife and have children. you plan these things in your mind, even when you're not trying to. It's like a subconscious thing, right? So, and I hate,
He's
you
gonna
know,
have a husband and children.
But
It's
but-
just a
but
little bit differently.
but
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
but it's a picture of it, right? I mean,
Correct,
let's just be real. So picture that's painted, especially when you grow up in like the church, you know, and
There's definitely a warning.
yeah, and you know, and it's not, and it was just like, oh, okay, you just have to revision things, right? And then, yeah, go ahead, Kevin. I want you to go.
You know, I think when a child comes out, the parents have to come out.
Yeah,
Exactly,
It's
they
a
do,
process.
a family
It's
has
a
to come out.
coming. It's a coming out.
And-
Like it's a process.
And so whether, you know,
I'm glad you touched on
you
that.
know, sometimes I've heard people talk about, you know, the mourning and the grieving process that families have to go through. And one of the things I've encouraged parents is that if it was my parent, I would not want them to grieve or mourn for me
No.
unless I'm dead.
I think it's the idea.
But they
But
should
you-
expect that
but I
kid
get-
to
but-
help them through that
Right,
process. They need
right.
to find their own support.
But I get what you're, because
Right.
those are heavy words, grieve and mourn. Yes, yes.
Because especially as a child that's trying to take some of this heavy news to a parent, you want the support. And I think that we're expecting our parents to still act in that supportive way.
Sure.
And not that was the initial reaction. It was the crying, it was the mourning. It was
Oh, yeah,
all
no,
these things,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that I don't think that was helpful.
No.
Well,
And-
yeah, I mean, could you imagine?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I
Like,
mean,
that they
I
need to
could-
find that support, but that's why you just love your kid.
Right.
Yeah.
You love your kid and let them know that in that moment,
Yeah.
especially.
And I think that's also why parents have to be able to continually get the emotional work that they might need as they're going through that kind of process. So like,
And as a parent and speaking with other parents, you know, not even just with just period, right? When people want their child to grow up and become an engineer, right? And they say they want to be a painter, and it's like, okay, you know, it's you know, and for me anyway, I mean, I'm gonna love my children regardless, like and they know that wherever path they go in life, period. You know, you just have to realign your thinking. You know what I mean? Because I mean, it's just a real thing, right? Because I mean, even like people when they have little girls, they imagine. And I didn't do that. I went outside and was like, this is it. You know, that was what I wanted. I didn't want all of that. So I'm sure my mother felt some type of loss from that because that was what she wanted for me. And it's like, well, this is
My
me.
mom cried for a week when I told her I was
You lived it how you.
It's mine, and I never once questioned whether they loved me.
Right.
And
They
that's
didn't
where,
always say the right things.
Yes.
Right.
But I never questioned whether.
That's
they
the
loved
part
me.
that's important.
And I know that that's a gift.
Yes.
Truly.
And it's important for people to know when you come out that your parents, that you've gone through this phase, that took you time to figure it out, right? And it is gonna take them time. And so I remember when I came out like that, I knew it was gonna take time because this is day one for you. Like this is day.
Especially like I said, that they weren't.
In the realities for parents oftentimes do come in, like, you know, this wasn't the vision I had, or for my parents it was always like you're on a path that you're going to be so successful professionally and this will make your life say, gosh, my mom always said that, that's like whoa, like clearly you've gone above and beyond what we even thought. You were going, like, what would have been possible if you had not come out. You know, so it's, you know, you just have to, you know, embrace where they're going in that and just be, you know, present that.
I think it goes back to the protection thing too, right? I mean, because I think about even with my children being black males, over 6 feet, hairy, you know. Okay.
yes.
You know, and if they were to date a white woman, right? Initially, my first thing would be like protection, because I understand that even though, you know, I may feel one way about something, society doesn't always, right? So I think it just goes like a parental thing where it's like, never want to, for me anyway, never want to strip you of who you are. I'm like out here seeing what the world is like, right? And it's this thing where I can't be with you to protect you and like go all the way in, and somebody and I just wanted him to be surrounded by people that would be there for him and where he could be himself and not be exposed to harm.
I
You know,
think the pain though of not being able to show up fully is it hurts sometimes even worse than some of the worst things that'll be said to you.
yeah, yeah,
Because you live with that
yeah,
every day.
yeah,
And like there's only 2 times that my parents ever said anything that was questionable in relation to like homophobia. So even though it was only 2 things, I think about them frequently. Then I'll look a little bit more feminine. But yeah,
what does that mean, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And those kids, like, they have gone through a long coming out process. There are 6 stages, based on a model from the 70s. There's 6 stages of coming out. And then the parents also have to go through that. So it is a big struggle for families to come out as well as their children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just was curious because I know sometimes parents are on that other side of it, right? And just wanting to know how to show up in a productive, positive way and not do more harm,
Well, I
right?
think you realize that there are people who can be professional and queer.
And funny.
And funny, and have a life, and have a fulfilling, enriched life, and that young kids need to see that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we are going to start wrapping up. I just want to have everyone kind of like give some type of closing. I really do appreciate this conversation. For me, even, I really enjoy people sharing their stories and their journeys. So, Josh, would you like to go first? Just kind of leave us with something.
Yeah, for sure. I think, thank you for having me. And I think to kind of close this, I just want to acknowledge that, I think the 4 of us, I don't know if everything, but I think we're really grateful for the experiences we've had and the support we've had. But I do just want to acknowledge that that is not the case for so many people, and that is still a very. We're here with you, we're supportful. Sometimes to do that, but be informed and just know that what you say and do is only going to help the people behind us.
And
No, I just want to say I appreciate that because I did have a person on here that works at a shelter for youth, and she talks about that how most of her population is within the community because they've been put out
yes.
and they're homeless. So it is a very real thing. People don't have certain resources, support. So it is a little thing. So thank you.
Yeah, and I was gonna say something, and it's totally gone now. But years, so old. Because from coming out to now, like I don't worry about like safety necessarily as much now. It's still something to worry about, but I feel a lot safer in my community. I know my people. I know that there are resources and community. There's community here now, where growing up we didn't have community. There is a type. It's true. Just keep on taking pride in yourself and figuring out what you want to do and what your passion is and where you want to go from there.
Thank you.
I would just say live out loud. For all the LGBTQ people who might be watching this, to just, if it's, I recognize safety is definitely something to be mindful of, but if you can,
visibility.
be visible and be vocal and be out. And for all the allies listening, that same message goes to you, because it's probably in the spaces that you occupy even more important for the message to come from you, because it's harder for queer folks to always get that message out to certain spaces. So it is really important. And also that LGBTQ veterans exist. So that's a thing, now.
Again, grateful for this opportunity, just to be a part of this conversation, but also with such big people. And so thank you. I guess I would say, or just stress the importance of doing whatever you need to do to love yourself. And I think from those activities, the expressions of who you are, will shine bright even more clearly. I think I'm grateful for parents that are willing to stick by their children's side, but also over the years, in the course of years, I know a number of Black families here in Saginaw that embrace their queer children and grandchildren, and just seeing those beautiful expressions make me realize what I did not see when I was here in Saginaw. So I applaud those families. I applaud these opportunities for these types of public conversations.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. We really, we owe it to you. You're
Oh.
doing the best work in the community, and it matters a lot. It makes a huge difference.
It's conversations and people being more visible that is what has been the thing that moved the needle.
I absolutely believe that visibility is advocacy, so you putting us out there, thank you very much.
Thank you. Were you done?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate you all. I really do. Again, I appreciate everyone that tuned in and watched. Share this message. Go a long way. Yes, be kind. So thanks again. I appreciate you all.